Welcome to the No Quit Living podcast, where we aim to inspire and motivate people to never give up on themselves or their dreams. We will chat with highly successful people from all walks of life and discuss what motivates and drives them to successfully attack life head on and never give up. Welcome to episode number 69 of the No Quit Living podcast. I'm your host, Christopher J. Worth, and today's theme of the day is Elevate. Our quote of the day comes to us from W. Edwards Deming. You can only elevate individual performance by elevating that of the entire system. I'm extremely honored to bring you today's episode. Our guest is quite an incredible individual that is truly positively impacting the lives of the youth in our country, especially through youth sports. In today's day and age, I feel that we have never needed positivity more, and our guest delivers on that need and then some. With that said, it is my privilege to introduce Jim Thompson. Jim, I'd like to welcome you to the No Quit Living podcast.
Thank you. I'm really excited. Excited to talk to you and love what you're doing. I love the name of your organization. This is going to be fun.
I appreciate it. So the first question we ask everybody is, are you ready to make it happen today?
It's a day-by-day thing. I have a friend, Leo Lindbeck III in Houston, and I actually quoted him in my book, Elevating Your Game, Becoming a Triple Impact Competitor. And he said, recognize that if you want to have a life without stress, you're not going to have much impact. If you want to have impact, you're going to have stress. And when you have stress, which I do, and I welcome, but I don't get up every morning like, oh man, I can't wait to go. Sometimes I have to kind of talk myself into it.
All right, well, I'll help talk you into it today, so I appreciate that.
Actually pretty good today.
So the number one objective of our show is to motivate and inspire our listeners to never give up on themselves or their goals and dreams. And I was curious if you have either a story about perseverance or perhaps a challenging time that tested you, but you didn't give up and you kept on going.
Yeah, when I started Positive Coaching Alliance, I moved over from the Stanford Business School where I ran the public management program for MBA students interested in public service. And I moved across campus. I was in an office and the students knew me and I had people coming through my office all the time. I felt important to their lives. And then I moved, started Positive Coaching Alliance. Ted Leon, the athletic director, got me an office and gave me some money. And I'm across campus in this dark office and I have no internet connection. My phone, I can call out, but it doesn't ring when people call me back. And I'm just feeling like, oh my God, what have I done? And I had a couch in this office. And I spent an inordinate amount of time on that couch in the fetal position thinking, oh my God, what have I done? And you know what drove me, Chris, is a sense of identity. When I started as a director of the public management program at the Stanford Business School, the term social entrepreneur I had never heard it before. But over the 10 years I was there, it became a term of art. Like there was nonprofit management, there was entrepreneurship, which is in the private sector. But then over that decade, the idea of being a social entrepreneur, where you start an organization to deal with a social problem, came along, and I really wanted to be one. And so what kept driving me was that identity. I want to be a social entrepreneur. I know something about youth sports. I believe I can make a difference here. And even though it was probably, I won't even say probably, it was the hardest thing I've ever done, I stuck with it because of that.
Now, if you wouldn't mind just briefly telling us a little bit about what the Positive Coaching Alliance is, because I'm sure a lot of our listeners are hearing about it for the first time, but we connected offline, and I think it's amazing what you're doing, but I was hoping you wouldn't mind just briefly telling us a little bit about it.
Yeah, let's start with the problem. We've got two interrelated problems in this country. One is, or the world really, one is we've got huge problems. I think about the greatest generation in the Second World War and the problems that my father and that grandfather, et cetera, faced. But I actually think the problems we're facing now with the environmental problems, racism, sexism, poverty, I just read something about the insects going away. We've got big problems. So that's the first issue. The second issue is we don't have enough people of character standing up to take those challenges on. And where I see youth sports coming, I see youth sports as the one of the biggest and maybe the most important institution in this country. It's certainly one of the most important institutions. We don't think of it as an institution usually because it's very decentralized, but a lot of how our society functions and how people behave, they learn in youth sports. So the idea behind Positive Coaching Alliance is, first of all, I started it because I saw kids having a really bad time and not performing very well because there was so much negativity. And I had been trained in this concept of relentless positivity. You don't let kids run wild, but every little move they make, they get reinforced for it. So the idea is if we can be relentlessly positive with kids, they're gonna bloom and they're gonna be able to do things. And then secondly, can we get them to take on an identity, just like I took on an identity of being a social entrepreneur? Can we get them to take on an identity of a person of character, a leader who is not just going to be successful in life? We want kids to be successful, but is actually going to be a positive force for the kind of change we need. So I didn't tell you very much about Positive Coaching Alliance. We take a systems approach. We work with high schools, youth sports organizations, athletic leagues, high school age and below, although we're doing a little bit of work, more and more work now with the colleges as well. We believe the problem in youth sports is the wrong culture. We have a entertainment sports culture where winning is just about everything. What we want is a development zone culture where youth sports is, you are trying to win, but it's really about developing better athletes and better people. We do this through workshops for coaches, athletes, leaders, and parents. We did almost 3,000 live workshops across the country this past year. We have something called the Development Zone Resource Center, pcadevzone.org. Which is any problem you have in youth sports. If you're a coach or a parent, an athlete, you're not getting enough playing time, your kid doesn't want to go to practice anymore, coaches are going nuts with parents driving them crazy, come to pcadevzone.org, and we've got resources for you that will help you get through that.
I think as a former high school, college, and AAU basketball coach myself, I think it's great what you're doing. And I have 3 young kids, 8, 6, and 5, and they are playing youth soccer and baseball, and they're getting into some of those sports. And I think some of the best experiences they've had and I've had as a parent is watching those coaches that interact with them in a positive way. And I think what you're doing is amazing, and I commend you for that, and I appreciate you sharing that with us. One of the things we talk about quite often on our show is personal development. And I was curious, Jim, if there's a book that really changed your life or perhaps something you read recently that you'd like to recommend to our listeners.
Wow, I read a lot. One book that really had an impact on me, and partly because I knew John Gardner. John Gardner, who started the White House Fellows Program and Common Cause. He was secretary of HEW under Johnson, and he kind of ran the anti-poverty program. He has a book called Self-Renewal. That was a huge book for me. The idea that individuals and organizations and societies need to keep renewing themselves. I could probably give you about 12 others, but that's the one that comes to mind right now. I've just read a book called Improv Wisdom by Patricia Ryan Madsen. She's a friend, and she taught improv at Stanford University. And the whole idea of improv is you don't prepare, you just show up and you try to be present. For many years now, I've been practicing mindfulness meditation. And the difference when your first question was, are you ready to go to it today? When you're ready, when you're centered and you can look around and you see things that you don't otherwise see, you're able to do an internal scan and see how you yourself are functioning, and then you can make a very different decision about how you want to act than if you just respond automatically. If somebody says something that makes you angry or whatever.
No, I appreciate that, and we always look for recommendations and things from other people that are like-minded, so I appreciate you sharing those with us. One of the things we utilize every day in our show is a daily quote. I was curious if you perhaps have a favorite quote.
Yeah, I got a million, and I want to get this. It's a Mr. Rogers quote. I was asked in an interview a while back if I could have dinner with anybody alive or dead, who would I want to have dinner with? And I didn't have a very good answer, but I thought about it, and I thought, the person I'd most like to have dinner with is Fred Rogers. Of course, he's not alive anymore, Mr. Rogers, and I kind of miss Mr. Rogers. I was a kid before he came on. We didn't have a TV when my son was a kid, and so I learned about him much later in his life. But here's his quote: "Love isn't a state of perfect caring. It is an active noun like struggle. To love someone is to strive to accept that person exactly the way he or she is, right here and now."
Wow, that is a powerful quote. And I have to tell you, one of the questions we ask on every single episode is, if you could have dinner with anyone, dead or alive, who would it be and why? So I will not ask that question because I know your answer would be Fred Rogers.
So let me make a thank you. Yeah, let me make a point about that quote. He says, to love someone is to strive to accept that person. And through mindfulness meditation and actually sports psychology, the idea of being gentle with yourself. I had a quote from I heard many years ago. Gentleness with self is the gateway to courage. And so this quote of Fred Rogers can be about other people, but often the person that we have the most trouble loving, the most trouble forgiving, is ourself. And I really believe that we have to be able to do that to be able to go forward. If I'm beating myself up about some stupid thing I've done, and I do a lot of things every week, I look back and say, "Oh, why did I do that?" I've got to be able to get past that. And we actually have a tool for dealing with that. So transformational self-talk. We also call it the power of a big but, B-U-T, not B-U-T-T. So transformational self-talk. When I do something stupid, when I do something I regret, the first thing that happens is my negative self-talk kicks in. Oh man, I'm so stupid. How could I have done that? Well, the first step, there's 3 steps to the transformational self-talk. The first step is to make it a true statement. Am I really stupid? Maybe I am, maybe I'm not. What's absolutely true is that I feel like I'm stupid. So I change it. I say, I'm really stupid. No, wait, I feel like I'm really stupid. And then we use the power of a big but. If I were to say to you, hey, I really like the questions you're asking me, but what's coming?
Negative something.
Yeah, what but does, the word but does, is it degrades whatever comes before. So I say to my wife, Sandra, I really like your new haircut, but she knows it's not going to be good. So but can degrade whatever comes before. It doesn't have to be good. So I feel like I'm an idiot, but I'm the kind of person who doesn't give up easily, who bounces back. You can use this with yourself. You can also use that tool. You're the kind of person who, with your kids, I bet you are disappointed that you didn't score on that penalty kick and that we lost. I understand that. But, one of the things I like about you is that you're the kind of person who is going to bounce back and come back to practice and try even harder next time.
Oh, I like that. And where is that something that you studied or just something you've came across during your professional career?
Yeah, I'm a total thief. I probably, if I had a half hour, I could dig up where I got that idea, but I found it in a sports psychology book somewhere. I added the power of a big but as a title for it.
You say the word thief. I say the word creativity, because I think anybody that's successful in any area of life, any career, any industry has taken, copied, tweaked, changed, improved. So I definitely, I think there's not a lot of people out there that can say that they've 100% created everything they've ever done or said by themselves.
Oh, I totally agree. Positive Coaching Alliance. I'll ask people, what's the most important word in our name? And they often say positive or coaching, but it's actually alliance. We really can't do anything by ourselves. We work with high schools, youth sports organizations. We have a national advisory board of people like Phil Jackson's our national spokesperson, Steve Kerr, Doc Rivers, Brad Stevens. We got some of the top sports people, some of the top academics who are involved with us. We have national partners, like we've got partnership now with the NBA, junior NBA, with Major League Baseball. We work with we really can't do anything without being allied with other people.
No, I could not agree more. And that's just not only in sports, that's life in general. That's with being a parent, that's being a child. I think there's so much to that comment. So I wanted to ask you, Jim, if you could go back and give the 20-year-old version of yourself one piece of advice, what would that be?
Wow, you got deep questions here. Another quote of Fred Rogers I really like is he says, life is deep and simple, and our society gives us shallow and complicated. So I guess the advice I would say is you're about to meet a woman named Sandra Haitala soon, and don't let her get away. We've been married for 45 plus years now.
Well, congratulations. That's a long time.
Yeah, and I feel like we love each other more every year. And, having someone, I was married and I had my son Gabriel Thompson, who's a writer now. He was in first and second grade when I went to Stanford Business School. And most of my classmates were not married. And the ones who were married didn't have kids. Or if they had kids, they had like babies. And Gabriel was starting first grade at the time. And people said to me, man, it must be really hard to go. Stanford Business School was very difficult for me. I didn't have much of a background. And I'd always been like the smartest kid in my class. And all of a sudden, I wasn't even in the top 50%. And the material was really hard. And people would say to me, well, it must be really hard to be in business school and have a wife and son. And I said, no, I come to school and I get beat up emotionally. I go home and it's Sandra and Gabriel who kind of build me up so I can go back the next day.
That's awesome. I think kids and spouses and having the right people in your corner definitely makes up for a lot of things in life. So I appreciate you sharing that with us. As we all know, Jim, life is incredibly challenging. We all have and uncover and encounter many obstacles. I was curious, what motivates you and keeps you going every single day?
I had the really great privilege really, to work with Jerry Porras and Jim Collins. They wrote a book called Built to Last, which was an amazing book. And then Jim Collins went on to write Good to Great. And they define vision as a sense of possibility. And, they also went into much more detail. But I think vision is a sense of possibility. In almost every situation you're in, there's something you can do to elevate the situation. And so I want to be an elevator. Elevator sounds like a common word, but it's actually a new word. It's elevator with an ER. It's being a triple impact competitor. I in every situation I look to see how I can elevate myself, how I can elevate my teammates, my family, et cetera. How can I elevate the game or the society around me? So that's an identity I have adopted, and I want to live up to it. One of the things we know from research, really powerful research, is that when people adopt a new identity, an aspirational identity, they try to live up to it. So we can get kids to do what we want in a short term by rewards and punishment. But the best way to get them to change and become great people is to get them to aspire to be someone who elevates to be an elevator, a triple impact competitor.
I think that's great. And people that elevate others in that regard, not the elevator, but elevate others to be better, to do more, to help more, I think those people are never going to be forgotten in your life. So, for example, if I'm a 12-year-old athlete and I had a coach, let's say Little League, and he elevated me or she elevated me to be the best version of myself on and off the field, those are the type of people that you're never going to forget, whether that's 5, 10, 20, 30, 40 years down the road. So I'm really glad you shared that, and I appreciate you telling us a little bit about that.
There's some really powerful research that shows they called up a whole bunch of registered voters, and half of them they said, how important is it for you to vote in the upcoming election? The other half they said, how important is it for you to be a voter? They tapped into the self, the identity. And what they found is the people who, and that's all it was. There wasn't any other intervention. It was just how important is it for you to vote? How important is it for you to be a voter? The people who were asked about being a voter voted in a much higher level than the people who were asked about. So when we're talking about kids, we can say, hey, this is what I want you to do. I want you to fill your teammates' emotional tanks, because we know that when people's emotional tanks are filled, they perform better. So I want you to do that. It's much more powerful if you tag an identity onto that and say, I want our whole team, I want everybody on our team to be elevators. And one of the things that means, that what elevators do is they fill the emotional tanks of their teammates. So that identity drives behavior. So if we can go up a level from the activity and tie it to an identity that drives that activity, we're going to be more successful with kids.
I'd never heard that survey about voters and whether it's important to be a voter or to vote. I think that's very interesting. And I think sometimes some of those simplistic questions have such powerful answers, and depending upon whether or not you listen to them, I think they can be unbelievably powerful and telling in many ways.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I wanted to ask you, Jim, is there anything exciting that you're working on or you'd like to share with our listeners?
Yeah, well, really, the first question we asked when we started Positive Coaching Alliance was, this is like almost 20 years ago now, what do kids need from youth sports? And we said they need to be connected to their coach and teammate, that they need their emotional tank filled. That's our tool. They need to believe they can get better. If kid may be a bad athlete to start with, but if they had a coach who convinced them they can get better if they work at it, sky's the limit. And that's having a teachable spirit and developing a growth mindset. We've got the Elm Tree of Mastery, E for effort, L for learning, M for bouncing back from mistakes. And then the third thing kids need from sports is they want to be part of a team that does things the right way. They don't want to be on a cheating team. And there we have the roots of honoring the game, where ROOT stands for respect for the rules, opponents, officials, teammates, and yourself. What we're doing now is we're asking, we know what kids need. What does society need from youth sports? And my answer is, our society needs thousands and thousands of triple impact competitors, elevators, who are going to grow up and they're going to be successful in their profession, whatever they do, but they're going to, in every situation they're in, they're going to look around and say, how can I make this better? So they become a politician, they become a business leader, they become a police officer, become an attorney, a teacher. In every situation, they're saying, they're tapping back into their identity as an elevator. And we're actually doing a pilot program right now with some winter sports coaches, and we're doing a second round of this with some spring high school sports coaches in the Bay Area. And the goal is to see if we can get coaches to get their kids to aspire to be an elevator, a triple impact competitor. And if they can, then what difference does it make? Does that drive behavior? Are they better teammates? Are they working harder? Are they doing better in school? Really excited about this because I think it has the potential. This is a grandiose statement, but I think it has the potential to change our society.
I think it has the potential to change our society, to change our country, and to change our world. So I'm glad that you are doing all the great work that you're doing. So I wanted to ask you, Jim, before we let you go, do you have any parting words you'd like to leave with our listeners?
Wow. I once I worked for the Oregon Department of Energy, and I worked with the legislature, and I once heard a guy testifying before the legislature, and he said, well, I've told you more than I know at this point. One thing that pops in my head, and this goes back to some of the things we talked about before. I was raised a perfectionist, and I think a lot of people believe that perfection is an ideal, and perfectionism is a good thing. Perfectionism is toxic. It's the idea that we have to be perfect. And I have a good friend, Greg Tavine, in Fargo, North Dakota. I grew up in West Fargo, North Dakota, in Colfax, Wyndmere, Mayville, and West Fargo, North Dakota. And Greg Tavine, who's a friend of mine back in Fargo, he said, perfect is good, done is better. And I find myself over and over again, I have to remember that, because if you're a perfectionist, at least for me, I think it's true. What happens when you're a perfectionist is you don't do a better job. You postpone. You don't want to deal with it because, oh man, I can't be perfect. And so we have an idea, a concept we call crummy first drafts, which I got from Annie Lamott, the fiction writer. crummy first drafts. Get something done. It doesn't have to be right. We'll make it better. Perfect is good. Done is better.
No, I love that. I think that's great advice. And last question, and I promise it's the easiest one. What's the best way for our listeners to connect or follow you or to find out more information about your company?
So we have two websites. Our main website is positivecoach.org. And my email is Jim, Jim, at positivecoach.org. And then I already mentioned the Development Zone Resource Center, which is PCA Dev, like development, DEV zone, PCADevZone.org. And that's the place where you can go with any kind of question about youth sports. And we will have experts who will give you give you some ideas about how to deal with it.
Jim, I cannot thank you enough for not only your time today as well as your insight you share with us. And I just want to reiterate to our listeners that they should definitely check out more information about your company and all the amazing things you're doing. And I think, as I mentioned, it doesn't just have the opportunity in the sports world, but it does lead on, because if you help kids at an early age, and if you help them positively and be impactful in their life in the sports field, in the sports arena, you're going to lead them down to a much better opportunity to be more successful and, as you mentioned, helping others. And I think that's the best part about today's interview, as you talked about, it's all about helping others. And I think in today's day and age, especially with all the negativity going on in our country, I think we need more people and more elevators. So thank you so much for sharing everything you did today.
Chris, this is really a fun interview, and thank you. I appreciate it, and I really like what you're doing.
To sum up today's episode and our theme of the day, Elevate, that is exactly what Jim is doing and who he is. While most people talk about an idea or think about potentially doing something down the road, Jim didn't just think or talk. He decided to take action. 20 years ago, he created the Positive Coaching Alliance, and ever since then, he has been positively impacting youth sports throughout our country. In today's interview, Jim spoke about the importance of elevating others, both on and off a team. He spoke about how his company is helping encourage kids through sports to become individuals of character as well as future positive leaders. I think that what the Positive Coaching Alliance is doing is incredible and very much needed. Jim spoke about how positively influencing the youth in our country at an early age can and will have such an incredible impact on all of our lives later on. Individually, we are strong, but together as an alliance, we are unstoppable. In his parting words, Jim spoke about how perfect is good, but done is better. He was clear that it is important to take action and to get things done, and we can focus on improving and making them better later on. So in closing, the question I would like you to ask yourself is very simple. Do you elevate others or do you bring them down? For today's call to action, I challenge you to elevate someone else. It doesn't have to be huge or monumental, but if every single one of our listeners decide to elevate someone else, together we will have a hugely positive impact. Choose to be an elevator and elevate somebody on your way to greatness. And lastly, to our listeners, thank you. We truly appreciate your time, and we hope our episodes inspire you to keep on attacking life and never giving up. To quote Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, it's always too early to quit.